Welcome back to the Horror Academic, and I'm realizing as we hit episode 30 of this show, even though we've covered more films than just 30, I realized all of the films we've covered really have been American movies. Some that are kind of American-British crossovers, but it's a bit strange, if you know me, that we haven't really covered any Italian horror. So I've decided that for the next couple episodes at least, we're going to work on rectifying this problem, and I thought no better way to start talking about Italian horror than with the first Italian horror film I saw, which was Lucio Fulci's Zombi. So let me give you a little backstory on my relationship to this film. When I started to get into horror with my friends in late middle school, early high school, we started watching, we were very into The Evil Dead. Like I've said, that's a big influence on me. I was very into catching up on Romero's films, particularly Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead were really big with me. And, we're getting through a lot of the series that you're supposed to watch, But one thing that we started to kind of dive into, we're kind of, I guess, more on the B side. A friend brought this to the group, and it was kind of this, we all heard about it kind of movie. And I have to admit, on my first viewing, as I am going to say, I was probably, I want to say, 8th grade, freshman year of high school. Around that time period, however old you are at that time period. I'm not great with this. So like 15 or 16. First time I watched this film, I was not impressed. I will say the effects seemed kind of cheap. The acting didn't seem great. The story was a little flimsy. And the budget was obviously not so good. And I was very swayed by all of that. And I was particularly also swayed by the representation of the female characters. Even as a preteen, I was a little put off by the kind of blatant nudity, and there was lots of jokes about how, well, they could afford to do a couple more zombies because they saved money by not buying any bras, or by not having to show the rest of the actress's wardrobe. Perhaps that gave them more money for blood. So that was my initial take on the film, and it took a few watches for me to really kind of warm up to this movie. And another reason, of course, is there's some very ridiculous scenarios that happen in this film. One in particular we're definitely going to talk about. So I was not instantly a Fulci fan. I was like, what is this stuff? This is crap. So I will say, eventually I did learn to love this film. And because, to look past the cheap budget and to kind of see, well, what did they do with what they had to work with? And it was not going to be Dawn of the Dead. And it wasn't even going to be Dawn of the Dead 2, which is very much its intention. But a very different zombie story, told from a different place and in a different way. So once I got past that and I could appreciate the film more, I really started to love it. And I've been to a couple of different screenings of it over the years, and it's definitely a film that I think solidified me more as a zombie fan, not just a Romero fan. So we're definitely going to take a look now at a little bit about Lucio Fulci. I'll give you a little backstory on Fulci. I'll give you a little bit of history on the film as well, and then we'll talk some of these editions that are out there. So Lucio Fulci, the man made many, many movies before he passed away in the 90s. He was very much like a Herschel Gordon Lewis. What we could kind of almost consider like the trash cinema or the exploitation filmmakers of American cinema. But he was doing it in Italy. And so that meant starting off with a lot of comedies, a lot of crime movies. Like, basically, he was like a director for hire, doing what was available to be done and what was popular to get financed in Italy. He had done a couple of things that we would consider thrillers or giallos, but he had not really made a horror film, per se, until Zombie. And if you, there was a very good interview with the writers of the film, who really credit that with some of the more stylized things that happen in this movie, is because Fulci didn't really come at it as a fan of horror or even much of a horror aficionado. He came into it as, this is the story that I have to tell because this is what the script is, and he did it in his own way. And because of that, he kind of inadvertently broke some rules of horror in the way he showed things and made things a little different. And that's what I think is exciting and different about this. I will say this version of Zombie is also unlike Romero's zombies. These are closer to what we think of as the voodoo zombies, the kind of the island idea of zombies. This is not necessarily where Romero's zombies are removed from that scenario. This is supernatural. This is has roots in kind of island voodoo, and it plays with those notions of, you know, preconception. We already know essentially when you hear drums in these environments that it's a voodoo scenario. So it's essentially the story of Zombie is that a team of doctors are sent to investigate a phenomena that is going on that can't be explained. And what it is they are researching the dead that get back up. And as being men of science, men from Europe, they don't believe in voodoo. They get there and they are overwhelmed. And the story that we see begins with the daughter of one of those men. Her father's boat is found in New York Harbor, and he's not there. So she wants to find out what happened to her father. A news reporter is also kind of put on the case to find out what is the deal with this mysterious boat that arrives in the harbor with a crazed man who attacks the harbor police when they come on board. And of course that's a zombie who has been kind of shipped there almost as proof of what's going on. And so the daughter and the reporter team up. They go to the island and they start to search for her father. They meet his partner, who at this point is kind of just a drunk who's kind of beyond even doing more than patching these guys up until they pass and then killing them. But of course, everything reaches a fever pitch and the zombies kind of overcome the island. That's the story in a nutshell. There's obviously more to it. The characters that we meet, let's talk about them and the actors who portray them a little bit, shall we? First up is that daughter that I mentioned. So that's Anne Bowles, played by Tisa Farrow. So if Farrow sounds familiar, that's because this is the sister of Mia Farrow from Rosemary's Baby. Tisa apparently had done, I believe, one of Woody Allen's films at that point. She had a couple of movies on her list. The only ones that seemed to be on the horror spectrum, I can't even pronounce. Entropius? Entropiphus? I don't know. That's a weird one to pronounce. Sorry. I haven't seen that movie. But, so yeah, that's Tisa Farrow. She's Anne Bowles, the daughter of the missing father. The reporter that she meets up with is Ian McCulloch. Ian McCulloch playing Peter West. He says Peter West often in the movie. He kind of did this kind of trio of what in Britain we would call the video nasties, kind of band movies. Zombie, Contamination, which is sometimes called Alien Contamination, and Dr. Butcher MD, which has a couple other names, I believe. Not one of my favorites, but definitely in there with the sleazy Italian gore films. So Ian McCulloch he's pretty regular in that. He's also really big in he's a British actor, a lot of British TV. I know he did an episode of Doctor Who back in the day, Hammer's House of Horrors, and a bunch of different mystery shows like Poirot and stuff like that. The other doctor is Richard Johnson. Richard Johnson, who plays Dr. Maynard. He also, a lot of British TV, but he was also in an episode of Tales from the Crypt. He was in the first Tomb Raider movie, and The Haunting from I believe that's early 60s. So I was surprised to find that out. And then they meet along the way when they're trying to find a boat to get them to the island. They meet this couple who are on just like a vacation in the islands on their boat, and that is played by Al Cliver and Annetta Gay. So Al Cliver is in a bunch of different Italian horror movies over the years. Some highlights. Here we go. We got he was in another Fulci film we would definitely talk about, The Beyond, which I absolutely loved. That's probably my favorite Fulci film. Fulci's Black Cat, House of Clocks. He's also in Demonia and Murder Rock, which is like another one of those like 80s Italian horror. A lot of it 80s Italian horror. Who sadly he's just stopped acting. And if you see the interview with him at the end of this documentary on here, he talks about how his wife pretty much stopped him from acting, which is sad. Oh, Al Cliver's character was Brian Hall, and Annetta Gay's character is Susan Burnett. She only has a couple other listings in IMDb, all kind of like Italian thrillers from the same time period. One called Ombre, and then there's a giallo called, oh, gonna work my Italian here, Delitto in Via Teluda. Probably not saying that right, but so she's a couple of thrillers. I'm gonna use the word giallo a lot in all these Italian horror movies. Giallo, and we'll talk about it more when we get to Argento and an actual giallo. But it's an Italian style of thrillers, kind of. So they tend to be a little bit more stylized than American thriller. So a few other things I definitely want to get out there about this film. This is a movie that also starts this period for me of learning about Italian films having many different names. So Zombie is Zombie in America. It's Zombie 2 in Italy, because Dawn of the Dead was called Zombie in Italy, so you had to call it Zombie 2. To which there was a court trial that I did not know about until researching for this episode. And apparently they won because Dario Argento of Italy was the producer of Dawn of the Dead. And he said, well, my movie's named Zombie, and your movie can't be just named Zombie 2, because then it's making it like it's a sequel. Well, yeah, no shit. They're obviously trying to make it seem like it's a sequel to Zombie, even though it's really nothing to do with it. But the courts eventually say, look, you don't own, like, a zombie as a thing. You don't own the rights to that as a title. So they win, and they get to keep their name. The British name for this movie was Zombie Flesh Eaters, which leads to some really cool radio ads from back in the day, where they just like to say Zombie Flesh Eaters over and over. Fun stuff. So this movie is definitely in like the gory zone. It's what in America we call a B picture for sure. It's definitely made on a small budget. One of those films where everyone obviously had many, many hats that they wore, but it was a crew. They start off in Italy, where they do all the pre-production. They work on the makeup and some of the particular effect scenes that they know are going to come into it. And the casting includes some Italians, but Fulci has this thing for Brits. He loves to put Brits in his movies. At least, I think in his horror films, he feels like it classes it up a bit. So there's some casting that happens in Britain, and that's how we get our two male leads. And then they run over to New York, where without any permits, they shoot some really great footage. Like I said, they're in the Manhattan Bay, shooting the scene of this boat coming in, and they literally have these great aerial shots that they just paid for, like a helicopter tour of the city, and hung a real 35mm camera pretty much out the window to shoot the sequences. The cinematographer talks about it on one of the extras, which is awesome. That's just how they got their footage that starts and ends their movie, which is amazing. They get a couple of scenes that take place at the harbor itself. They shoot some coroner scenes, but I'm sure it's just the exteriors, and some interiors of the newspaper where Peter West works. His boss in that sequence, by the way, the editor of the paper, is Fulci. Which is cool, because Fulci loves to put himself in all of his movies, and whoever dubs him, there's no sync at all. It's awful. But it's still fun. It's like a Hitchcock moment, like Find the Fulci. It's a little game you gotta play when you watch these movies, but it's all good. And then they go to Santo Domingo, I believe, which is the island that they use for Matul, which is the fictional island of the film. So that's all, that's where most of the budget of the film, I'm sure, went, was all this travel and getting the crew to all these places. I'm sure, I think they said that the New York crew was maybe a handful of people, like 2 or 3 people. And then getting the rest of the crew to Santo Domingo to shoot all the island scenes, because most of the film takes place in the islands, which they do really well. There's beautiful kind of cinematography in showing this kind of desolate village with the shambling dead, and like the equivalency of like a western with tumbleweeds, that kind of a sequence. So they do an excellent job of that. They've got an old church that has been kind of made into almost like a military triage, where the dying are, the dead are, the ill, and the set design that makes everything feel kind of this very realistic, even though it's in this kind of very fantasy setting. It has a very almost EC Comics kind of air to it, but the way that Fulci shoots it and the way that the team that he has makes it does feel like it could be very real. It has this very griminess, this gritty and dirtiness to it, that you feel like the sweat of these people in this film, which I think is an excellent asset to this movie. It gives it this kind of, where it's such a fantastical idea of zombies walking the earth because of voodoo, it grounds it in a way that makes it, I think, a lot more believable. And those sequences can therefore be a lot scarier. So hats off totally on that. So, like I said, I mean, despite the obvious hurdles that they had with finances, like most horror movies, to be realistic, right? There's so many things about this film when I watch it now that I really love about it. Particularly, I'm a huge fan of Fabio Frizzi's work on the score. And it goes throughout the trilogy that we will talk about here, of going from Zombie to Gates of Hell to the Beyond. Frizzi kind of builds on these themes that he starts with in Zombie, and I think that's amazing, and I love that. Yes, you have the very typical island drums kind of motif going on, but there's also some really haunting themes. It's early synths. I'm sure we're just hearing kind of the early choral synths, but it's very effective, and even with the repetition of it, I do really love it. And there's a really great staccato piece that really kind of, like, once you get into like the more actiony sequences, really kind of picks up, and yeah, the music is one of the biggest highlights for me about this film, for sure. Okay, I said I'm going to mention some of the more ridiculous things. The most ridiculous thing about this film is the moment, well, there's always an eyeball scene in a Fulci film. I'm just going to say it. He has this thing for eyes. He doesn't like them. He likes to torture them. I don't know why. So there's an extended sequence where a woman, Dr. Maynard's wife, is attacked by a zombie, and they're struggling with a door. She closes the door to the point that she's able to break off its fingers, but it still manages to break through the door itself and pull her in to a splinter in the eye. So she gets a splinter to the eye, and we see it up close. And I remember this sequence over the years just felt agonizingly long. But watching it this past time, I was like, that's only like a minute and a half. That's not that bad. But all this to say, this elongated moment of the eye, coming from this angle, seeing what she's going towards, seeing the eyeball up close, and then all of a sudden the obvious switch to the fake face. But it's something that this film is famous for. I will definitely say that is a moment this movie is famous for. I don't know if it's my favorite moment, but this movie's famous for that scene. It's also famous for the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen, probably, in a zombie movie, and probably one of the other reasons on that first viewing I did not like this movie. There is a sequence that is zombie versus shark. Just gonna leave that there. I don't know what else to say about it. I can laugh at it now, but at the time I was like, this is dumb. But it's there. It's a moment. It happened. Somebody said, hey, let's get a shark trainer and have him dress up as a zombie. And so there's a fight underwater, which is all to set up the sequence that I probably like least in the film, which is setting up that the couple that's on vacation, she likes to go snorkeling or scuba diving so that she can do underwater photography. cool. That's a fun pastime. But she does it with nothing on but like a thong bikini and a rubber shower cap. And then she gears up and you're like, well, at least you got the shower cap. You know, that's going to protect you if anything in the ocean comes at you. Italians, I don't get it. Put a friggin' shirt on that woman. Give her a bathing suit or something. Jesus Christ. Anyway, I still have issues with this film, but I still love it. This is what it is to be a horror fan, guys. This is what it is to be a female horror fan sometimes, is to get stuck in these moments where you're like, this is stupid, and I know it's stupid. I love this movie for everything else, you know. So that's where I'm at with this, totally. Right, so some other great things about Zombie I wanted to talk about. This is 1979, so Dawn of the Dead's out. Dawn of the Dead is like one of the biggest movies in Italy. It has a complete change of focus on Italian horror because it's released by a Italian producer, so everyone goes, oh my god, we should have been making more horror movies, and that's what they do. And that's even why we get Zombie 2, but the fact that it's a movie about zombies in the Caribbean, A, proves that they didn't watch Dawn of the Dead, which is cool, that's fine, and that, you know, they were just like, well, what are zombie films about? What are zombie things? And it harkens back to this like 1930s, 1940s idea of what zombie movies are, and it's movies in the islands about, you know, voodoo. So I like that it's an updating of that, and it's not particularly cruel to the original source, I feel, of zombie in voodoo culture, where it doesn't try to really, it's basically these outside people saying, this is ridiculous, this is crazy, this can't be true, oh shit, it's true, you know, like, so I don't think it really tries to break it down further than that. Italian horror can be very shallow at times, and sometimes that's all there is to it, and I get that, and I appreciate that in this, that I don't feel like there's too many sequences of appropriation. There's maybe, you have to deal with the two helpers that the doctor has being kind of pushed aside or minimized because of their obvious communication issues. There's broken English, you know, and a broken English compared to a British scientist is going to obviously sound, you know, he's going to sound superior in that moment, but he also sounds superior to the white folk that show up when they get there. So I think that's just his attitude, personally. Yeah, Italians come into a place they have no right to be to make this movie. I get that. I understand that. But I don't, this is a film I find I find this much ill will. I really don't. Oh, but yeah, aside from all of those great sequences that take place in Matul, like I said, the footage in New York is awesome. For stolen footage, which means footage shot without the proper permits, it's really amazing work. They get, I mean, they're on the Brooklyn Bridge. The movie ends, total spoiler, as if this wasn't a spoiler before. The movie ends with essentially them bringing back, it's recursive in that fact that it's a boat coming back to New York Harbor again, but they're on their way back to New York and they hear on the news that the zombies have already, because of the one that came in the first boat, overtaken the city. So the last shot is hearing the radio of, you know, the attack going on in the radio station and the Brooklyn Bridge with zombies walking across. And it was not like, hey, let's call the cops and have them close the street and we'll pay the fine and blah, 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 blah. No, it was like, let's shoot this at 5 o'clock in the morning and just put as many people as we can that are in makeup on the bridge and make it happen. And that's what they do. And oh my god, what a great scene that is. I love that sequence. So, I mean, I really appreciate that stuff. It's amazing. I have a lot of love for the New York part as well in this film. I really appreciate a lot of the sequences that are kind of zombie POV shots throughout the film that set up some of the creepy moments. There is, before the eye sequence, the splinter sequence, there's a few moments interspersed where you see the doctor's wife in their home. She's kind of gone, they kind of point to this kind of hysteria that she's just been around all of this for so long that it's driving her nuts, and it's like, we need to leave, and he still thinks he's got to, you know, do something about it, and she's kind of stuck, and she's kind of meandering about the house trying to bide her time, and you can see moments where zombies are outside her window watching her. And it's not shot like a monster movie, monster watching. It's shot a little bit more like a thriller, like a stalker watching. So there's a difference right there in approach that is more of a POV than just kind of like a creepiness. It's there's an element to this of these zombies, although they're fairly kind of shambly, and they don't seem to have like the ability like Romero zombies to use tools and things like that. They do have this kind of slow steadiness to them that is a bit unnerving, and I think these sequences start to play that out. The real finale of the film takes place in the church, and there's this wonderful sequence where the music's really pumping at this point, and all the dead they're no longer on the cots because they've joined the zombies if they haven't been shot, and they're coming, and they're just they barricade the door of the church, the survivors, and they're literally like bouncing off of it to try and break the barrier. They have no other ability to kind of fight back, so they just smash into this door until it falls down, and then you have kind of this makeshift line that's in the middle from like gurneys and things, and the survivors throwing Molotov cocktails and using the one shotgun that they have to slowly try to take out at least some of the zombies. And there's this really, I love, it's repetitive. We definitely are seeing the same sequences over and over to make it seem like more, but the shots, the action shots of the Molotov cocktails going off, and then there's some wonderful quick camera movements where it mimics the movement of the shotgun, and you're kind of in there, you follow quickly with them, seeing them, and then you have the eye line of the shot that they take, and then you see the zombie fall or a door fall down as the zombie gets hit, and it's just, that sequence is really well put together. Looking at it now, I really appreciate the editing in that scene too. So yeah, great stuff. Oh yeah, I totally forgot one of the sequences and why this face is so important to the movie. This is a conquistador zombie who they find the burial ground of the Spanish conquistadors who came in, and the sequence where he stands up from the grave. So talk about zombie POV. I love it. So that they talk about the fact that to make this impression, so they had the mask that he wore, they had to wear a patch on one eye so that they could cover it, and then they would sew onto the mask, once he was in costume, maggots and worms, and there's a lot of maggots. This is another Italian horror thing. There's a lot of maggots. So I didn't want to forget to talk about how much I love the Spanish conquistador zombies, and that sequence is great. Good stuff. This film is a good starting off point in general if you have not really experienced Italian horror before, because it has a little bit of what we're used to in kind of Western horror, where we have a fairly typical scenario. There's nothing particularly groundbreaking about any of these characters. This is a pretty typical storyline, and it also follows to most extents the formulas of a horror film. I will also say that once you can get past those budgetary barriers, Italian horror can kind of open up for you. But I recommend definitely the other film, which we'll probably talk about next month, that I started with. The other film was Dario Argento's Suspiria, which I really didn't get that film as a kid, and had to come back to it over and over to really understand it and appreciate it more. Where this, I just had to get over the budget. Once I was okay with the cheesiness of it, that kind of, the B-moviness of all of it, and kind of embrace it like that, then I was fine. This movie was good to go. It's very quotable. The boat can leave now. Tell the crew. There's just great moments for like zombie action stuff. And this is a good starter off. I definitely would say if you can get past the budget, and if you can get past senseless nudity, which, like I say, I still have some issue with. Everything else about this film I can definitely recommend. Lucio Fulci is not known for being kind to actors. Like I said, he has this thing for Brits, though. I really feel like when you hear these stories, and there's a lot of them on the extras of, you know, the reminiscing of their time with Fulci, particularly because a lot of these extras started to be made right after he passed away. He was not the nicest guy, and he was very mean to the crew, to most of the actors, but the actors he got from out of Italy, like the non-Italian actors, I feel he gave them a little bit more graces, and if almost reverence, looked up to, or didn't want to piss them off because he wanted to work with them again. It's very common to see these actors kind of coming back to Fulci. But you hear really horror stories about the way he treated particularly the women on most of his films. This is not uncommon for the time. This is particularly not uncommon of Italian filmmakers. This is a generational thing that is hard for us now to understand that this was okay. That he literally would throw temper tantrums like a little kid on set if he couldn't get his way. He would curse out little kids who were actors on the films if he felt that they weren't getting it. He would act things out himself to show them how easy it was. He would yell at the crew. He was not a nice guy. But I hear that was also his demeanor on set was not necessarily his demeanor the rest of the time. There's a lot of directors who feel like they need to put on airs or to have a certain persona to get what they need done. And I have a feeling that has partly to do with it. And maybe that could also explain to me why he felt like he could treat his fellow Italians that way, because they were part of his crew. Whereas people he brought in from outside were guests, and he had to treat them such. Personal opinion based on what I've read and what I've heard other people say in countless documentaries. I could be totally wrong on this, guys. I've also heard he had a tendency not to bathe, not to brush his hair or his teeth, to keep food in his pockets. He was a weird dude. I'm not gonna say it isn't true. But for a man who made like some crazy amount of movies, and only a small portion of them are the horror films that we recognize him for today, you know, he got shit done, you know? So, that's why I feel the more I learn about Fulci, I put him more in the same category as the kind of like the H.G. Lewises of you know, the 60s in America, where they were just pumping out film after film, and whatever kind of film that was, to get it made in time and get it done, and if it looked great, awesome. If it didn't, okay, move on to the next one. You know, that was just kind of the way it was done back then. So, but I will say Fulci's films, as we see here, start to have their own style in horror. And we'll see how that continues as we go. I'm definitely going to talk about a couple more in the next couple of months. And, you know, I'm glad I'm kind of righting this wrong of not getting to any Italian in my my horror movie kind of exploits here. So, let's talk a little bit about versions of Zombie that are out there. Like I showed you guys already, that I have a couple different versions, I believe, of the soundtrack, because I also have live versions, because I was lucky enough to see Frizzy tour in America a couple of times now, twice. That's definitely, like, I think that was probably as important to me as if I could have ever met Fulci. Meeting Frizzy was almost as important. So, so really the collecting point of Zombie starts here with this beautiful Laserdisc by the Rowan Group. This one has audio commentary. Yes, there's the radio spots, the trailers, TV spots, all of that great stuff. But yeah, I mean, this was one of the things, one of the first, I think, lasers that I got. And I was also very amazingly lucky that over the years, a couple of the stars came to America at a couple of different conventions. Yeah, so Al Cliver I met, Ian McCulloch, I believe, and Richard Johnson also, I believe, I've met. Gotta go with the laser. This is definitely one of those kind of movies. This is going to reveal a lot about my nerddom. One of the reasons I kind of pushed back on doing this episode sooner, even though I've been thinking about it for the past 6 months, was the fact that I realized I was dumb and sold off one of my editions of DVD and was mad at myself for doing so and had to go on eBay and find another copy. Because I'm like that, and I'm wrong sometimes, and I'm dumb. But so this is my preferred DVD edition. This is Anchor Bay's Zombie. This from the Lucio Fulci collection. It's fairly bare bones. It's essentially that Laserdisc on a DVD. It's commentary track with theatrical trailers, radio spots, blah, blah, blah. But it's a really great print. And the big difference I'm going to talk about right now. I sold it when this edition came out and I bought it, 25th anniversary edition, which has, you know, like some stuff. It has 98-minute featurette talking to the special effects artist, the cinematographer, and the screenwriter, cast and crew interviews. Alright, so it had all that cool stuff, so I'm like, alright, well, I don't need the other edition anymore. Here's the problem. I'm not bad-mouthing anyone. I don't know who worked on the edition, but for Shriek Show, Media Blasters, whoever did the sound, they're trying to do some, like, popped-up fixed audio mix and screwed it up so bad it hurt me how bad the sound was on this edition. That here's one of my favorite scores, and yeah, screwed it up, and it didn't sound good anymore. So, restored, remastered, blah, blah, blah. You screwed up the sound, guys. So, buy this for all the extra cool stuff, but if you already have this, hold on to this, because it sounds way better. And then the edition that I definitely recommend is the Blu-ray, of course. This is Blue Underground. This had wonderful, very, very recent interviews with a lot of the people who are still alive who worked on this film, including the cinematographer, the special effects artist, the two writers who were fabulous to listen to talk, Ian McCulloch, Richard Johnson, Al Cliver, and Octavia Dialloqua, who is the actor behind this mask. There's, yeah, lots of really great things on here. There's an interview with Frizzy. Fulci's daughter is on this one. I mean, Guillermo del Toro talks about why Zombie is one of his favorite movies of all time as well. This is a great edition. I highly recommend, and you'll get why I love this movie. I think if you watch it this way, it's wonderful. So, some really great visuals. Like I said, great music and some really cool sequences that add to the zombie lore in film make this one absolutely a recommend, and I love it. And Fulci, as weird a guy as he was, made some pretty awesome movies. So that's it for tonight. Guys, I hope you've seen this movie. Tell me about it if you've seen this movie. Tell me, you know, what is your favorite part of Zombie. And next time we'll dive in. I'm thinking of going the Argento way next month, and we'll talk about an Argento film then. All right? Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Horror Academic.